Let's start. We are in actually chapter 9. We actually today are going to start the Tanya. We didn't even start. What did we do up to now? Up to now, we learned the language of Tanya. When we're going to use terms from now on, we will already know what those terms are. So up to now, this is what we did. Shalom Aleichem. So in Perek Aleph of Tanya, we learned about the two souls. That we have a godly soul and an animal soul. As you all remember. Perek Bet specifically, thank you. We learned about the godly soul specifically on the Perek Bet. And then we learned also about the 10 Sfirot, Chabad, Chokhmah, Bina, Dat, the intellect, the emotions, the 10 spheres, and how it transcends through the world. In these 10 spheres is within each and every one of us. In Perek Gimel and Dalet, we also learned, Perek Dalet specifically, we learned about the garments of the soul. Thought, speech, and action. If you remember. And in Perek Hey, we learned about the advantage of learning Torah over mitzvahs, over commandments, and then we learned the advantage of commandments over Torah. And this is pretty much where we were last time. And we're going to start now on chapter 9. Chapter 9 can be found on page 37 in the bottom or 26 in the top. And chapter 9 is one of the most interesting chapters there is for a specific reason. The Tanya is a practical book. It tells you how to deal with yourself, which is the hardest thing to. It's easy to deal with everybody else. The hardest thing is to deal with yourself. The only thing which is not practical in the book of Tanya is chapter 9. Chapter 9 is not practical at all. All chapter 9 is going to discuss if the godly soul has its say, what would it want? It tells us the ideal. If you come to the godly soul and you tell it, what would you like? Explain to me. Give me everything that you want. You know, how would you like to control the body? How would you like to focus? So chapter 9 of Tanya is going to describe to us what the godly soul wants. And then we're going to see if it can achieve it, or if it doesn't achieve it, or what's the problem is in achieving it, and so on and so forth. So let's start. Perek Tet, chapter 9. Vehine, and behold, like we said, Makom Mishkan Nefesh HaBehemit, where is the animal soul dwell within the body? Shemiklepit Noga, that it is from Klipas Noga, like we discussed before. There's two klipot. There's two things, two worldly things that we interact with. One thing is Shalosh Klipot Atmeot. God tells us you cannot elevate. These are all the prohibitions. You can't elevate them. And one is Klipat Noga. Klipat Noga is things that we can elevate if we have the right meaning. For example, money. We can take money and we can use it for good. We can take money and we can use it for bad. That's Klipat Noga. So, the place where the animal soul is, Bechol Ish Israel, in all Jewish men, Hu Balev, it is specifically in the heart. And we're going to now explain it even deeper. Up to now, we just said the heart and we just left it there. But it's not anywhere in the heart. In the heart, there are two ventricles. There's the right ventricle and there's the left ventricle. The right ventricle has no life. What do you mean it has no life according to our analogy? The blood is not oxygenated. The left ventricle is the oxygenated blood that goes around and gives life to the body. So, hu balev, it is in the heart, bechalal smali, in the left ventricle. So the oxygenated blood is the place where your animal soul thrives. Let's call it this way. Shehu maleh dam, that it is filled with blood. And like we learned before, vechtiv, and it is written, ki hadam hu hanefesh. It says that the blood is the soul. The soul is blood. This is why Adam means the first soul. Because Dam means soul, and Aleph means one, and the word Adam means the first soul. Velachen kol ha'te'avot, and therefore, every time you have a desire to worldly things, also to unworldly things, but every time you have a desire, you're going to feel the desire in the heart. That's the place where you feel the desire. The heart is not more of a tool to feel desires than your nose. It is exactly the same. It cannot feel desires. But it has the most concentrated amount of blood in it that makes it feel. Kol ha'te'avot, that's where you feel all your desires, ve'itpa'arut, and all your boasting. Every time you come to the conclusion that you're better than the next guy, that comes from the heart. Ve'kas, and anger, that's where you feel it. Ve'domehen, and all similar feelings. Hen balev, they are in the heart. Umehalev, and mitpashtot bechol haguf. And from the heart, they go around and enliven the entire body. Not just the body. We explained before, if you remember, that intellect controls our emotions. It's true. Intellect gives birth to emotions. A kid who doesn't know the value of money is incapable of loving money. A 3-year-old is not going to love a $20 bill. He's going to prefer a lollipop. But me, I prefer the $20 bill because I know the value of money. How do I know? The intellect. The intellect told me what the value of money is. So the question is, how can a person be a thief, be a cheat? It all come from the intellect. Because sometimes, as we remember, we call intellect the parents, and we call emotions the sons, or the daughters, the offsprings. Sometimes, just like in some houses, the children run the household. So also within human beings, there are many times where our emotions run our brains. They don't control it. They tell it what to do. The brain can tell them, excuse me, who's the boss over here? But usually, for example, a person can have a desire for money, and he can come and tell the brain, which the brain tells him it's wrong to steal, but the emotions will tell the brain, excuse me, you come out with ways how to steal, and then we'll deal with your morality later. Just tell me, how am I going to steal? Which conniving way am I going to use in order to steal? All of a sudden, instead of the brain of the parents running the show, running the household, who's running the household? The emotions. The emotions are telling the intellect, excuse me, you are going to serve us. We're running the show over here, not you. Just like in some household, where the children are running the household and not the parents. וגם עולה למוח שבראש, it goes out to the brain in the head, לחשב, to think about it, ולהרהר בהם, and to think about it again, להתחכם בהם, to be conniving in all kinds of ways, or how to use them. כמו שהדם בקורו מהלב, just like the blood, its source is in the heart, ומהלב מתפשט לכל האיברים, and from the heart, it flows to all other limbs. וגם עולה להמוח שבראש. And it also goes out, and it gives livelihood, gives life to the brain that's in the head. In other words, there's going to be a battle. The emotions are going to come and tell the intellect, we're going to be running the show now. We know that it's supposed to be the intellect running the emotions, but the emotion tells them, no, we're going to run the show. We're not going to do the right thing, we're going to do what's comfortable for us. This is when the children are running the household. Doing the right thing, that's intellect. Doing what's comfortable for us, that's the emotions, that's the desires. So up to here, we're all familiar with this. So now we're going to ask the godly soul, and you godly soul, what would you want? How would you like to run the show? Ach makom mishkan nefesh ha'elokit, the place where the godly soul dwells, hu b'moichin. It's in the intellect. So we know, we have two things now. We know that the animal soul dwells in the emotions, in the heart, and the godly soul dwells in the intellect. Why does it dwell in the intellect? I'm just going to mention it a little bit right now. It's going to be discussed later on. The intellect of a person is the only way you can think outside of yourself. In other words, mathematics have got nothing to do with you. You're not connected to mathematics. 2 + 2 = 4, whether there's human beings or there's no human beings. It has got nothing to do with us. It's a concept. So the tool to feel concepts is going to be, well, intellect. Intellect is a tool to feel concepts. Hu b'moichin shebarosh. It is in the intellect that's in the head. Umisham mitpashetet lechol ha'evarim. From the intellect, the godly soul wants to start and do what? And to have full control over the entire body. That's what the intellect wants. We said, we're going to ask the godly soul, what do you want? Your ultimate goal. We're going to see he's not going to be able to achieve it. But that's what he wants. He wants to go to all other limbs of the body. In other words, any movement that you're ever going to do is going to be according to what? According to your intellect. And by the way, in that there's 2 levels. There's intellect for the organism, what's good for the organism, and then there's intellect of what's good for God. We're talking about the intellect of what's good for God, not what's good for the organism.
Is it good for the soul or good for God?
The soul is godliness.
Okay.
Right? But in other words, you can come up to a conclusion, what's good for me. We're not talking about what's good for the organism or for humankind. We're talking about what's good for God. That's what the godly soul wants. It doesn't want what's good for the organism. It wants what's good for God. Many times it happens to be that what's good for God is good for the organism, but not always. Usually that's the way it is, but not always. And what does it want then to do? It wants to control all the limbs. It wants to tell you what to think. It wants to tell you what to do, what to move, how to move, when to move, how much to move. It wants full control of the body. And also it wants vegam balev. It also has some control over the heart. Not the left ventricle. The left ventricle it cannot control at all. It doesn't have control over the left ventricle. The left ventricle wants to live. That's where life comes from. Only thinks about is the organism. That's the left ventricle. Where does it have some control? On the right ventricle. Non-oxygenated blood. Vegam balev b'chalal hayemini. In also the heart in the right ventricle. She'en bodam. The one that doesn't have blood. When it says it doesn't have blood, it doesn't mean it doesn't have blood. It doesn't have living blood. It doesn't have oxygenated blood. Ukmo shekatuv. Where do we find this concept? All over the Torah. You've probably heard it. It says, Lev chacham leimino. The heart of the wise is to the right. So many people translate it right and left, kindness and might. So the heart of the wise is to be kind. But that's not the initial translation. The initial translation, the heart of wisdom is the right ventricle. In other words, the brain controls the right ventricle. When it comes to the life force, once the blood has life force, it has no control. Life force wants its own agenda. The blood, after it's oxygenated, is thinking about one thing and one thing only. I want to make this organism alive. And I'm going to make sure I'm succeed. That's what it's thinking about. Vehi, and then what is the ultimate of the godly soul? I ahavat Hashem kerishfei shalhevet. It wants you to love God with a fiery furnace. Mitlahevet belev maskilim mavinim mitbonenim. It's going to be enthusiastic in the right ventricle that the person yearns for godliness. Beda'atam asher bemocham. How they're going to think about godliness? With their intellect that's in their brain. Bedvarim hameorerim et ahava. They're going to contemplate things that awaken love of God. In other words, they're going to learn specific things that will awaken by them the love of God. That's what the godly soul wants. The person to be. I'll give you an example. Very good. I'll give you another example. I'll give it more practical than the Shema. If you remember, you were 16 years old and you were in love. Yeah? All day long, you thought about that particular person. In math class, in science class, when you went home, when you took a shower, before you went to sleep, it's first thing in the morning. That's what the godly soul wants the right ventricle to feel. I want you to yearn for me constantly. That's what I want. I want a constant yearning towards godliness. V'chen simchat levav, and I want you to be happy in it. I don't want you to love me because I told you to love me. God says, I want you to love me because you want to love me. I want it to come from you. בתפארת השם והדר גאונו. כאשר עיני החכם אשר בראשו, it is when the eyes of the wise one that is in his head, במוח חוכמתו בינתו, in the brain of his intellect, his bina, מסתכלים ביקרא דמלכה, they're going to look at the greatness of God, ותפארת גדולתו, עד אין חקר, they're going to see how God is infinite, cannot be investigated, ואין סוף, ותכלית, he has no beginning, no end, כמבוגר במקום אחר, like it's known, to explain in other places. וכן שאר מידות קדושות שבלב ומחבת שבמוחים. And it wants you to have love of God, awe of God, everything of God. And where does it want it? Like we say, he doesn't have control over the left ventricle, so he wants it in the right ventricle. And here we comes to the problem. What's the problem? The problem is going to be, we all remember when Rivka was pregnant. Rivka was pregnant with twins, Yaakov and Esav. And when she was pregnant with twins, they always fought in her stomach. The two twins were constantly fighting in her stomach. She went to the Shem. If you remember, Shem had a yeshiva at the time. She went to Shem and she asked for advice. What is going on with this child that I have? And Shem told her, it's not one child, you have two children. You have a godly soul and you have an animal soul inside of you. That's what he's going to tell her. Remember Esav. What's Esav? Animal soul. Red. You remember? Red and ready. He was born ready. Just like the animal soul, as soon as you're born, it wants to survive. It doesn't need 13 years in order to come alive, to get responsibility like Yaakov. It's immediately ready. It knows what it wants immediately at the moment he's giving birth to. This is Yaakov. And he tells her, one sentence he tells her, you have twins, and then he tells her, Achi nektiv, and it is written about those twins, Uleum mileum yeametz, and one nation from another nation becomes stronger. In other words, how does it work? They say about the American economy that it's not a zero-sum game. If one industry makes money, it doesn't take away from another industry. Both industries can go higher. Over here, he tells her, no, that's not how it's going to work over here. It's a zero-sum game. What does it mean? The stronger the one is going to be, the weaker the other is going to be. It is impossible to have a strong animal soul and a strong godly soul. If one is strong, if one is 90, the other one is 10. If one is 50, the other one is 50. It is exactly a zero-sum game. The animal soul and the godly soul.
One can't dominate the other? Is that what you said?
They can. But it's a zero-sum game. They cannot be both 60, the power of 60% of the body.
What about 50-50?
50-50 they can be. 50-50 they can be. 49-51. 99 and 1.
If you're lucky, that's what we're shooting for, right?
50-50? We'll see. We will talk. We will talk if we can get to 50-50. Veleum meleum yametz. And one nation is going to become stronger from the other nation. It's a zero-sum game. Why? Let me take one of those. ברוך אתה אדוני מלך העולם שקונה את דברו. כי הגוף נקרא עיר קטנה. We're going to give an analogy now about this godly soul and animal soul. The analogy of the godly soul and the animal soul is of that of two kings who are going to fight over a city or over a country. כי הגוף נקרא עיר קטנה, וכני ששני מלכים נלחמים, when you have two kings who want to have control over the city, and the two kings are not foolish. They don't think there's going to be a two-state solution. They know it's not going to happen. You're not going to have a two-state solution over here. No, each king wants to be 100%. Just like the Palestinians shout from the river to the sea, we don't shout, unfortunately. We should. We should also shout from the river to the sea, but we don't. But we should. Like the two kings are fighting על עיר אחד, on one city, שכל אחד רוצה לכבשה. Each one of the kings wants to have completely conquered the city, ולמלוך עליה, and to govern it. Why does he want? דהיינו, להנהיג יושביה כרצונו. It wants all the citizens to do its will. The animal soul wants to do its will, and the godly soul wants to do its will. And they're in constant fight over the body. ושיהיו שרים למשמעותו. In other words, the intellect wants the emotions to be according to him. And the emotions wants the intellect to serve him. The intellect is the godly soul in our case. The emotions is the animal soul. The animal soul says, you're a tool for me to steal money. I'm going to find conniving ways how I'm going to steal all the money in the world. That's what the animal soul wants to use the brain for. And what does the brain want to use the emotions for? The brain says, I'm a product of God. I want my heart to be immersed within godliness. Love God, have awe of God, and so on and so forth. בכל אשר יגזור עליהם. Besides the fact that each and every one of them wants to control all the limbs of the body. כך שתי הנפשות האלוקית והחיונית הבהמית, This is where the two souls, the godly souls, and the animal souls, Shemea that is from the klipa, we're going to use that word, klipa means the other side, nilchamot zo im zo. They constantly fight one with another. Al aguf, to have control over the body. They both want to control this body of ours. V'chol evarav, and all the limbs. Should I come? Should I daven this morning or I shouldn't? Should I put on tefillin this morning or I shouldn't? Yeah? It's a whole fight. Sha'elokit chafetza v'retzona, the godly soul wants. Now, these are true kings. They're not fake kings. What do I mean they're true kings? A king wants to rule. A king cannot rule with somebody else. Only one king. You can have play chess. Only one king. You can have 5 queens. You can have 5 queens in a game, yet you can only have one king. Yeah, but you can only have same thing within over here. A king is alone. Only one king. ורצונה שתהיה היא לבדה המושלת אליו. It wants to rule only me. No one else is going to rule. In other words, if you ask the godly soul, I don't want that person to ever have an emotion towards the physical pleasures of the world. All its emotions should be well towards me, towards godliness. That's what the godly soul wants. What does the animal soul want? I'm going to use all the tools in my disposal, even the brain, to survive and to be here on a better state. I'm going to have more money, more honor, more whatever it is I desire. ומנהיגתו וכל האיברים, that all the limbs, יהיו שרים למשמעתם ובטלים אצלה לגמרי. And completely, all the limbs should be completely nullified. ומרכבה אליה. They should be not even have an opinion. In other words, the godly soul is not happy if it rules constantly. It's not going to be happy. Unless there's no fight in ruling. Let me say what I'm saying. If every time it wants to rule, there's a debate between him and the animal soul, and in the end he rules, he's not happy. He says, I don't even want the debate. The fact that there's a debate is a problem. I don't want the animal soul to even say his opinion. He shouldn't even be there. And the animal soul, that's the same thing about the godly soul. I don't want him to exist. You know why? Because I'm important. In other words, I have 10 minutes. You have 10 minutes. You have a person had a hard day. You had 10 minutes to relax. Right? Before you see the wife, before you come over to see the wife, the children at home. So now you have a question. The godly soul says, you have 10 minutes, open a book and learn Torah. The godly soul says, let me go through the internet, see what's going on in the world. The animal soul says, you know. In other words, the animal soul doesn't even want the godly soul to say, maybe you shouldn't do that. Because it doesn't want to feel guilty. It doesn't want it to talk. It wants to eliminate it completely. It says, don't talk, just sit down. Yes.
But I'm confused because you cannot eliminate your animal soul. You can only strive to control it. No?
Very good question. Very good question.
You have complete control and mastery. Did you eliminate it?
Very good question. And this is, you remember in the beginning we discussed what's a tzaddik, what's a rasha, and what's a benoni. A tzaddik, we're going to see later on, he is somebody who controls. What level of control he has, we'll talk later on. Some tzaddikim have complete control. Some tzaddikim have semi-control.
But it's a control, not an elimination.
Some have complete elimination, as we're going to see soon.
Really religious,
But
solid, righteous guys, do they?
no. Or maybe there are, I don't know any.
Oh, okay.
He didn't finish. The Lamed Vavar,
Yeah.
he didn't.
Uh-huh.
But on Shabbat,
You feel different.
you
You feel different.
relax and enjoy the pleasures of the world, right?
That's
The
right.
physical world.
That's right. Shabbat and holidays. That's right. ויהיה לבוש ל10 בחינותיה. It wants to be all the 10 attributes of the soul. It wants to be completely immersed in it. וגיבל למושיה, and also the 3 garments, thought, speech, and action. It wants all the thoughts, all the speech, and all the actions only to belong to whom? To me. That's what the godly soul wants. In other words, the godly soul, I never want you to think about something else. I never want you to act about something else besides me.
And so does
And-
the animal soul say the same thing.
Very good, very good. So does the animal soul. We're going to see there's going to be a difference in the end of the chapter. וגימל לבושי הנ"ל, שהתלבשו כולם באיברי הגוף. They want all the powers of the soul to be dressed in the limbs, ויהיה הגוף כולו מלא מהם לבדם. And the entire body is going to be controlled by it, by the godly soul. ולא יעבור זר בתוכם חס ושלום. To such an extent that ever a foreign thought comes in, you will immediately eliminate it. דהיינו, so what does the animal soul wants? Sorry, the godly soul wants? תלת מוחים שבראש, it wants all his intellect, חוכמה, בינה and דעת, יהיו ממולאים מחב"ד שבנפש האלוקית, are going to be only thinking about godliness. שהיא חוכמת השם. This is the wisdom of God. ובינתו להתבונן בגדולתו, and to always look at the greatness of God, אשר עד אין חקר ואין סוף להוליד מהם על ידי הדעת, and it wants through the intellect and to the chokhmah and to the bina to give birth to awe of God and love of God. He wants awe of God is in the brain, ופחד השם בליבו, and the fear of God in his heart. Let me just give a quick explanation. What's the difference between awe and fear? Awe is more intellectual than fear. And I explain what I mean. There's an analogy that is given from the Tsar. A lot of people can't relate to the Tsar today, but in the old time think that you're a peasant. And when you hear that the king is coming, the king of your country, the king is all powerful. He's like a god in the old time, especially in the Tsar's time. And he can do whatever he wants with you. And people felt, I'm a complete subject of the king. They were serfs. In other words, they belong to the king. They felt, people cannot feel this way today because there's no such concepts today. But just imagine that a person felt that he's an object of the king, like a cow of the king. That's how he felt. Just like a king has a cow, a king has me. That's the way he felt. And there was a farmer that once heard, he became a soldier, and he heard that the king is coming next month to the base to see the people, to see the soldiers. So it says, you immediately had a great awe of God. He said, wow, the king is coming. It says, but when the king walked down the line, the soldier fainted. It says, what's the difference? He knew for a whole month that the king is going to come. Why did he faint? The faintness was because the king was right next to him. This is already called fear. So before that, it wasn't fear. It was awe. Always think about it as awe as an intellectual fear, and fear, when it says pachad, means you feel it right in your heart. If you ever were in a time of war, or somebody was shooting, or somebody was scared, you feel it. Your whole, it's like, it's not nice to say, but you feel it. Where? In your backside. It goes like this. You feel it. You actually feel the fear. It's not just an intellectual fear. ואהבת השם בוערה בליבו, and he wants to have godliness, a love for godliness in his heart, כרשפי שלהבת להיות נחשפת גם קטן שלו בחשקה וחרצה דווקא בו בעץ ברוך הוא, to completely be attached to the godliness, בכל לב ונפש, with all his heart, with all his soul, ומאוד, with all his might, even to give his soul away, מעומקא דליבה, from the depth of his heart, שבחלל הימני, that is in the right ventricle. That what does he want from the right ventricle? שיהיה תוכו רצוף אהבה מלא. He wants the right ventricle to be completely filled with the love of God. To what extent? Vegadush, that it will overflow. This is for your question. What does it mean, overflow? It wants it to go and overflow to the left ventricle. In other words, the godly soul wants the person to become an angel. Not to think about itself as an organism. Not to care about his wife, his children, himself. That's what it wants. To completely over. Ad shetitpashet, and look what it wants. It doesn't want to kill the animal soul. No. We're going to learn later on that the animal soul has a power that the godly soul doesn't have. It wants to overtake it. It wants to grasp that power away from it and to use it for its own purposes. עד שתתפשט גם לחלל השמאלי, until it's going to go into the left ventricle, לאתקפיה לסטרא אחא. In the beginning, it wants to force the evil inclination. In other words, it wants to go into the left ventricle and tell the left ventricle, we're going to do what I say, not what you want. That's what we're going to happen now. You're going to love what I want you to love, not what you want to love. Imagine loving put on tefillin more than we love steak. It's hard. I say it there. Imagine a person in our state and mind that actually loves to put on tefillin as much as he loves to eat steak. When you're hungry, when you're starving, you know? And by the way, most of the way we put on tefillin is the way we brush our teeth. It's just, we put on tefillin. When we eat steak, we get excited. Oh, food's coming. You know? יסוד המים הרעים שבה, it wants to completely consume the pleasures of the world from it, שהיא התאווה, that this is the pleasure שמקליפת נוגה, לשנותה, it wants it to change, ולהפכה מתענוגי עולם הזה, and to change it from pleasures of the world, לאהבת השם, to have pleasures from God. And where do we see this? In the Shema itself. Where does it say it in the Shema? How do you say your heart in Hebrew? No, that's not how you say your heart. No. Lev means heart, so how you say your heart in Hebrew? If Lev means heart? Very good. You say libcha, your heart. Libcha, lev means heart, and cha means yours. Yeah, your heart. But it doesn't say in the Shema. It says levavcha, tu bet. What does the tu bet represent? God says, I want you to love me with both your ventricles. Not only with the right ventricle, I want you to love me also with the left ventricle. Yeah? Bechol levavcha. It has two bets over there, not libcha. In all your heart, two hearts. Beshnei yetzarecha, with both your desires. What does it mean, both your desire? The desire of the godly soul and the desire of the animal soul. I want you to bring over to me. Vehainu, sheya'ale v'yavo v'yagia, that is going to come to a level, למדרגת אהבה רבה וחיבה יתרה, to such a high level that is going to be consumed with godliness to such an extent, ממדרגת אהבה עזה כרשפי אש, והיא הנקראת בכתוב אהבה בתענוגים. This is a very light, high level of God, of love to God. It is called a love בתענוגים. You have a love that comes out of pleasure. להתענג על השם מעין עולם הבא. To enjoy God on the level of a person enjoys him in heaven. By the way, maybe I'll just say it a little bit over here. If you want physical explanations for the two kinds of love, it's the two kinds of love one has for a wife and has for children. The kind of love for a child is much stronger than it is for a wife. But the question is, if that's so, how come we feel the love for a wife much more than we feel the love for a child? So it says this is the difference. One love is like fire, and the other love is like water. We call it nachas in Jewish thing. From a kid, it says you get nachas. Look at my kid. You get such enjoyment out of seeing a 4-year-old play nicely. You get such an enjoyment out of that. It's much deeper than any love one could have for a spouse. But it doesn't manifest in the same fiery thing as it is. So it is, over here it says, there's two kinds of love to godliness. Some people love godliness like I want godliness. This is a love that a person has like for a spouse. And it shows that you're different, by the way. Whenever you have a love which is fiery, it shows that you don't have true union. Because it's a burning kind of love. When you have true union is with your child. The child is you. He is your continuation in this world. That's what the child is. He's your continuation. So because of that, you love him like you love yourself. You don't love yourself with a fiery love. You just love yourself. The same thing you love your child. So a person can get to such kind of love to God. I love God because God is me. This is a very high level of love to God. But that's what the godly soul wants. We didn't say, you remember from the beginning of the class, we didn't say if it can be achieved. We ask it, what do you want? והעונג הוא במוח חוכמה ושכל המתענג בזכירת השם. And you feel that enjoyment just like you have awe and fear before. You remember the two things? Awe and fear? That's where you have the two kinds of love. One is an intellectual kind of love, and one is a visceral. It's right in your body. וידיעתו, כפי השגת שכלו וחוכמתו, according to how much intellect a person have, according to how much wisdom he can have. והוא בחינת המים וזרע אור זרוע שבקדושת נפש האלוקית. We're the next page, page 41 or 28. And this is what the godly soul wants. המהפכת לטוב את בחינת המים שבנפש הבהמית. It wants to take control of the power of the animal soul and overturn it and bring it to holiness. שמהם באו תאוות תענוגי עולם הזה מתחילה. That in other words, in the beginning, the godly soul has a problem. What is the problem of the godly soul? It's intellectual. Intellectual things are not visceral. When you have an intellectual thought and you have an emotion, a visceral thought, the visceral thought is always going to be stronger. So the godly soul knows it. So it says, I want to be visceral also. The only way it can be visceral, it's not if it kills the animal soul. It wants to take over the animal soul. That's how it becomes part of the body. In other words, the same emotions you had for a steak, the same emotion you had for honor, the same emotion you have to survival, I want that emotion to be subjugated to me now. I want you to love godliness with that emotion. That's what the godly soul wants. Where do we see this? We see this Be'etz Chaim in the writings of the Arizal, Sha'ar Nun, Perek Gimel. We also B'Shem HaZohar, and over there the Arizal writes it in the name of the Zohar. Shehara, and this is your question, the evil, the visceral part of the body, nehefach liyot tov gamur, completely transforms to become godliness. In other words, the person becomes an angel. He has no desire for existing anymore. If you ask the person, do you want to live? You want to be alive? He wouldn't understand your question. He said, what do you mean? I'm here to serve my Creator. You know what it is like? It's just like if you ask the photon, what do you want? The photon will tell you, I don't exist. I'm a continuation of the sun. That's what a person like this would tell you. What do you mean I want to be alive? I'm a continuation of godliness. I have no desire to exist. I do exist. Just like the photon exists. But I have no, I don't know what exists. I am a continuous, the sun is here, I'm not here. That's what the godly soul wants to turn the human body to. כמו יצר טוב ממש, it wants you to become the good inclination. בהסיר הבגודים הצועים ממנו, when it removes all those dirty clothing from him, שם תענוגי עולם הזה, this is the pleasures of the world. שהוא מלובש בהם, that the person is dressed in them. וכן שאר כל המידות שבלב, and then also all the other attributes in the heart, the love, the awe, שמנפי היראה והאהבה, יהיו להשם לבדו, will only be to godliness. You're only going to love God, you're only going to have awe of God, nothing else. וכל כוח הדיבור שבפה והמחשבה שבמוח יהיו ממולאים מן לבושי המחשבה והדיבור של נפש האלוקית. And all your garment, thought, speech and action are only going to be completed with godliness. שם מחשבת השם ותורתו להיות שיחתו כל היום, that the entire day לא פסיק פומיה מגרסה. The person is only going to think, talk and be godliness. וכוח המעשייה שבידיו ושאר רמ"ח איבריו יהיה במעשה המצוות לבד. And the only thing he's going to do is do commandments, nothing else. שהוא לבוש השלישי של נפש האלוקית. This is the third garment of the godly soul. And if you want to ask, and what does the animal soul wants? Exactly the opposite. There's two lines for the animal soul. What does the animal soul wants? Exactly the opposite. It wants to control the entire body only for me. I want to kick God out of the picture. I am God. I decide. Who is God to tell me what to do? I will tell God what I should do. I own my own body. I can kill whatever is inside of me, like with abortions.
God is dead. I am dead.
Or God is dead, at least you have an excuse. Some people know that God still exists, and still they say, our problem is that we're religious people. We know that God exists, but we still tell him, I'm your boss, and not you, my boss. We're going to do what I decide, not what you decide.
I can only think of the Rebbe,
I can also not think of anybody else.
that's the guy that comes to mind when you're describing this,
That's right. Somebody whose his entire life is consumed with godliness.
but he loves it.
Yeah. But, and over here, we're going to have a wrench that is going to throw into it. Is going to tell us something which is completely you're not going to expect. And he tells you, you should know that the animal soul wants your good.
Wants what?
Wants what's good for you. By the way, not what's good for you as an organism, what's good for you is the subject of God. And over here, that's not understood. So we're going to he gives an analogy over here. The analogy is brought down in the Zohar. There's an analogy that goes like this, that there was a young man who grew up in the palace of the king. He was the prince. And he was a genius. And he had good attributes. He was kind, he was strong, he was brave. Anything that you can say about the prince. And he grew up, he became like 16, 17 years old, a beautiful young man. And one day, one of the advisors of the king come to the king and says, he's not kingly material. The son of yours is not kingly material. He won't be able to run the kingdom. So the king told him, what are you talking about? Look at him. He's the greatest thing. He says, yeah, of course he's the greatest thing. Because look, where does he grow? He grow in the palace. He's got the best teachers. You pick up his friends for him. You tell him who to hang around with, who not. He has the best example. All the advisors of the king are next to him all the time. He sees only great things. He never had any trials and tribulations in the world. He won't be able to run the country this way. He needs to be tested. So what does the king do? The king gives him a salary for a month and tells him, go out to the world and don't tell anybody you're the king's son and try to live in the world. Let's see how well you do. And the son goes. A second later, the king goes down to the kitchen and he got one of the maidservants over there. She is one of the most seductive maidservants there is. And he tells her, you have a job. Your job is to go out and to seduce my son. That's what you're supposed to do. That's what you're supposed to do. And now she goes out, and her job is to go and seduce the son. Now I'm asking you a question. Does she want the son to fail the test, or does she want the son to pass the test? And the answer, she wants the son to pass the test, obviously. She doesn't want him to fail. But he knows that if she's not going to put all her powers into the seduction, he's not going to become stronger. He's not going to be able to elevate himself.
Is the maidservant the animal soul in this example?
Very good. The maidservant is exactly the analogy that the Zohar gives to the animal soul. It's not here to make you fail. It's here to elevate you. It's here to bring you higher. But you know it's going to do its job. The job is what? To seduce you. Because if it's not going to try to seduce you, the test is not going to be a real test. So the animal soul that so far we thought is the enemy, all of a sudden turned to be the tool that is going to elevate us to become even better than we were before.
An assistant to God.
The highest assistant possible. And this is why the godly soul doesn't want to kill it. It wants to bring it over. That's what it wants. It has those desires that the godly soul doesn't have. Godly soul is not able to have visceral relationship with the body like the animal soul can. And that's what it's all. And this is the analogy of the whore, of the prostitute, that it's a famous analogy that the Zohar brings about what the purpose of the evil inclination is. The evil inclination was created, the desires for things that we have was created for that.
So the animal soul wants the body to live, but the animal soul also wants us to be connected with Hashem.
Very good.
Is that right?
Yes. But it's, you know what, it's going to act to make you fail all the time. The action of it, it's going to try to make you fail, but inertly it wants you to pass the test. It doesn't want you to fail. Just like the prostitute wants the king's sons to become better because she's a loyal subject of the king. So she went. By the way, this is also a good analogy to think about the Satan. Yeah? It's the same analogy. It is there in order to elevate you. It's not there in order to interfere. It happens to be that its job is constantly to interfere. But it's there in order to elevate.